just happy to be here.
What is up, beautiful people of the world? My name is ExZac Change, and I'm happy to be here today with my guest, Lacrecia Hill.
Hi.
Hello. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing really good today. It's a good day.
Me too, even though it's gloomy. And we were just talking about how frosty it still is, because it was like starting off as a morning thing, and you get the frost, and then you're like, it'd be sunny and nice. And now it's like 1 o'clock, and we're still like, all right. You were like, this is how it's going to be till March. So
Yeah,
like,
I've just accepted winter at this point. It's here. It's happening.
Well, we've rescheduled this already like a couple times. I'm super
have.
excited to get you on now and to talk about what you do. You do multiple things, and I don't know if a lot of my audience knows anything about you, so I'm super excited to introduce them to you. So why don't you just take a second and just kind of introduce yourself and let us know what you do.
Okay. So currently I have my own consulting business. I call it LMH Consulting for now.
Okay.
Although I started my career in nonprofit and philanthropy, but made the change in 2015 into cannabis. Although I get to say that I don't have many legacy points, but cannabis happens to be one of those because my mother and my uncle grew my whole life. So
really,
cannabis was always kind of in our home. It was never not in our home. And so cannabis, in 2015, I was working for Empire Health Foundation and spending most of my time kind of observing poverty and social systems that create poverty. I became very interested in the other side of being a job creator. And for me, cannabis seemed like the natural place to be. I love weed.
Yeah.
Like I really love weed.
Yeah. Okay. So that helps.
That helps.
Yeah.
And then my mother had a farm and had been in the medical business for a while and had a storefront at the Eastern Washington Cannabis Market, which was the only market style cannabis stores during the medical time that Eastern Washington had. Was
that here in Spokane?
Yeah, it was here in Spokane over on I think it was Second, over by the Staples over there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was.
Wow, that's really interesting because I didn't really know anything about like cannabis as far as like medical or anything like that, like before it was legal like recreationally. And I know that there was a big community, but it was just like I wasn't a medical patient, so I was just kind of like shunned out of this thing. And I've always been so interested in knowing more about it. I always hear the weed is much better. That's what people say.
You got the freshness, so that was good. I was super naive too. When I went, I didn't even know what an eighth weighed.
Okay.
Because when I got weed, I would just go to my mom's house and get a mason jar. So I didn't.
Yeah, you're like, oh, an eighth? What's a?
So I had a cheat sheet that like how many ounces were in a pound, and so when I went there, I thought that it was just a place where people went to get cheap weed. It was the best education in cannabis I could have ever
because
gotten.
you were already just stocked up.
Yeah. And weed wasn't the business that I was in. I was doing philanthropy and nonprofit work. Mm-hmm. So I was with Boys and Girls Club for 7 years.
Wow.
When I graduated from Eastern Washington University, I wanted real social service experience. So I moved down to Vegas and got hired by the clubs there. And I love Boys and Girls Clubs. I love working with kids. Mm-hmm. Plus, I think if you're a secret stoner, like it's the perfect job.
Yeah, because you get to like be a kid in a way and just get to like have fun and like just play around.
Yeah, and I really learned about management. Like that's kind of been like my career focus has been bringing people together to kind of reach objectives. So that's where I got to kind of do it first. So after I was in nonprofit work in Vegas for a while, I came home and
so you grew up here.
I did. I grew up here. I'm a third generation Hilliardite.
A Hilliardite.
Yeah, I am.
North side.
No, I'm hardcore Hilliard.
So when did you what really brought your interest into philanthropy and just like helping people? Was it?
I think it was growing up in Hilliard. Like I think when you grow up in Hilliard, you grow up with a lot of kids who have to deal with a lot of adult things, especially in the 80s and the 90s. Most of my friends' parents were either selling crack, growing pot, or doing those things.
Yeah.
And so I think you create this like youth community amongst each other where you kind of help each other out. Like many of my friends had lived with me at some point, mm-hmm. or, I had the most stable home mm-hmm. compared to some of my friends. So I think like that's where this like, I think a need for justice came from. Mm-hmm. Going to Rogers High School and seeing that you have used textbooks from Ferris, you're obviously realizing like you're not getting a fair education.
Yeah, and you're seeing it on like like on a peer level too, for somebody that you can relate to directly, and just like seeing that you're in a position to help people, like giving them a place to stay and stuff like that.
Right. And not only that, like there's a lot of people who are smart outside of a traditional system. And I think Hillyard is a perfect example of that. Like it's a lot of people who find other ways to be resourceful. And so I was traditionally book smart, so that was my hustle. And I think we all, if you grow up in that environment, everybody has something. So I was really good at being smart. And so that's what I did, where other people were really good at selling things or
the hustle.
Growing. Yeah. So that's kind of what I grew up with. But I think it did give me this sense of like, why don't I have the same resources or opportunities that people from different neighborhoods have? And there's tons of studies out there. So as I was in philanthropy and doing that type of work, if you look at health-related data based on socioeconomic levels, you learn really quickly that people on the South Hill live a much healthier life than people in the 99207 zip code. And to me,
and it's not
that far away. But it's a vastly different health experience. And
that's
I
crazy.
Think, so that's kind of, I think I always say growing up in Hillyard definitely gave me the sense of like justice and wanting to understand these systems that are in place and make it really easy for some people to be successful even when the odds are against them, and for other people not so easy. I've always said like a family in Hillyard who struggles with addiction has so many more challenges than a person on the South Hill who suffers from addiction, because they do too.
Yeah, it's wild how in such a small city you can have such a vast difference. In Hillyard, I've always known ever since I moved here that Hillyard kind of had a reputation for struggling more, and the South Hills always had a reputation for kind of being more upper class and stuff like that. So I think that it's really cool that you can kind of see like where you can help people and where you're seeing that people are just not getting a fair shot. It's just really all perspective, right? And being in that situation. And I talk to a lot of people who just they have a hard time putting themselves in other people's shoes.
Right.
And they just know like what they've lived. And I really respect people who can kind of take themselves out of their own personal life and really kind of be able to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and saying, oh, well, the reason that they're doing this or that they are this way or because of X, Y, Z, they grew up like this, and then like you said, there's people have different skills, and it's not always book smarts. Like even if you went to school, like people are like, oh God, this sucks. And some people are like, dude, I fucking love learning. I love math. I love coming here. And some people are just like me, I just couldn't even, for a lot of subjects, I was just like, oh God, kill me, and but then I had so many friends who they just loved it. They were just so good at it. And so I think that it's good to have appreciation for all types of people who, learn differently and have different skills and stuff like that. That's really cool.
Well, I think even working with kids, like you get to see people in their most, I think, authentic form before they have anyone telling them what they're good at. You naturally get to see what they're good at. And I think that too often we force people to be something they're not because we created a system that says you have to be this to be successful.
The system is weird.
It's fucked.
Like even just like the school system and what, when they talk about, because I never even really thought about the things like, one teacher teaching 30 kids and how that's difficult. Yeah. I'm just like, oh, well, that's how it was. And what do you mean? You just teach it. Everybody listens. It's simple. But when you learn that every kid learns differently, and some needs hands-on and special attention, some are good in class, some you can just give them a book and they can just learn. It's like every person is so different that trying to fit one curriculum for everybody.
And have you ever met a teacher outside of they're a fucking hot mess. I know lots of teachers.
I always thought they had it all together
no,
too.
Teachers are they party really hard. They are not, and they come with their own bias. Like if you look at the curriculum of a teacher, they really don't learn how to necessarily understand a human. They understand how to create and teach a curriculum. And I think the human component of it sometimes gets missed.
Which is why teachers should get paid more money. And they should be able to, there should be some in that degree of learning how to teach, there should definitely be more psychology, human psychology in that. So that way they can understand, because teachers deal with some crazy shit.
insanity. Like kids and their families are crazy. And you bring up my bachelor's was in psychology, but not, I always have to, not counseling, but research.
Okay.
So when I was in college, I worked at an after school program at Gary Middle School. And so I went to those schools and then I worked there too. So that I wanted to be a teacher at first, and then I hung out around teachers, and I was like, not that there aren't amazing teachers, but the ones that I encountered, I felt like they were really disconnected to the community that they served. And I knew these kids personally because I grew up in the community. So a lot of them were cousins and little brothers and sisters and friends. Yeah. So I had a different perspective on what challenges they were experiencing. And it was always really interesting how out of touch they were from what these kids were dealing with on a regular basis.
And I always wonder how much pay has to do with that, and how much like it just being a job and them not being so invested, but them like, dude, I got my own life and I want to try to do good, but it's just like, you know, I'm sure that you're going to perform and you're going to care about as much as, you know, you're getting paid. I know that in this country, especially, that is like, you know, if you're not getting paid enough, you're kind of like, you know, I'm going to do this much, and, you know, why would I invest more time? And then there's the people that really care. That's why you're saying there are some teachers who really just care.
Yeah, and we don't create enough space for those people to show up
and praise them enough, and like, you know, they need to feel
pay them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and pay them and physically pay them, because
and give them some liberty. I think the system has become so like, it's more about the system than serving the young people that show up every day to engage in the system, and they're the ones who are actually experiencing it. So like I was saying about psychology saved my life, because when I went to the inner cities of Las Vegas, I, you know, growing up in Hillyard, I was like, I know poverty, like I got this. And then I showed up in Vegas and I was like, oh no, this is a whole level of poverty Northwest poverty is different. Like
just more perspective. That's crazy.
Vastly different. And so when I got there, I was like, oh man. And so the first thing I started implementing when kids would misbehave was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he has a theory that if you don't have basic needs met, like food and care and all these things, then you can't learn. And so like when kids were having a bad day, I started asking, you know, well, what happened last night at home, or are you hungry? Those two questions usually got me my answer. And usually it was, you know, my electricity was shut off. Mom got picked up and is back in Mexico. Like it was all these like, oh, okay, well, if I were you, I'd have a really shitty next day too.
Yeah.
So it was that question that really, I think, and it also was a catalyst of how it changed how I manage people, because I really hated being a manager. Like it felt very authoritarian.
Yeah, like you're just telling people what to do. You weren't helping. It didn't feel like helping.
Yeah, it felt bossy, which I do like to be bossy, but in a helpful way.
Yeah.
But then I started really researching more coaching. And so that's kind of how my career path went towards more coaching people and working with kids and adults. And a lot of times the adults I worked with were fresh out of college. So we're young adults. And so for me to be able to meet grant goals or organizational goals, it really became, because those goals aren't just numbers in terms of financial reward, they're really human numbers, like how many kids got A's and B's on their math and reading based on the time they've spent in the Boys and Girls Club. And so that's how I started to really get into managing people and getting people together to reach a goal, which is kind of more related to the consulting business I have, which is coaching and then helping companies identify their processes so they know how to create training programs.
So that's kind of where it all started.
Right.
Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah.
And then not only being here, but then going somewhere completely different where you could experience a whole new level of, and it's really just like it's just different. People were dealing with different issues.
Totally different. I remember the thing I heard first was this little girl, she was singing a nursery rhyme, and it was, I don't want to go to Mexico no more. There's a big fat policeman at the door. And my jaw just like dropped. I was like, did this little girl just sing this song? And I was just so like,
wow.
This was in, 2008, 7.
I don't think a lot of people can really, think about, like, they take for granted that thought process of fucking maybe getting shipped off to somewhere that you're like, what the fuck? Like, this is my home here. and you need to go home. You need to go. You're like, what the fuck? Like, a lot of us don't even know what that's like.
No, I couldn't. And that was the biggest culture shock for me. The Boys and Girls Club I worked at, there was, what was it? 60% Latino and Hispanic, and the rest was African American. And so that was my first exposure to Latino and Hispanic culture. Mm-hmm. And it was very, very eye-opening in terms of the family dynamics and how hard they were trying to work to mm-hmm. create something different and better for their kids. And mm-hmm. how awful for us not have a pathway to citizenship for them is, because it creates, honestly, the kids become victims. And when kids don't have an outlet to be able to tell somebody that they're being hurt mm-hmm. or that they need help, mm-hmm. then that creates even more issues, I think, for any community.
Anybody, yeah, mm-hmm. So anybody.
It was definitely an eye-opening experience, especially a cultural one when it came to Latino and Hispanic families.
So how long were you there?
I was there for almost 4 years, yeah, almost 5 years.
5 years, wow.
Yeah, Vegas was... I missed home. Like, I love the Northwest, so I definitely, like, I would see people with Northwest plates and, like, approach them. Like, you're like, oh, hey, you're from Oregon.
We have a piece together. I know that place.
But I found that Vegas was pretty much a small town. Like, everybody sees the Strip, so they think that you don't ever go to the Strip.
You just feel like it's going to be super touristy everywhere you go, but it's so much bigger than just that one little piece.
Yeah, well, and it freaked me out too, because I had kids. So I work with a lot of girls, and we were in a girls group, and they were sharing like what they're excited for. Mm-hmm. And this one girl who was a junior, she's like, I'm super excited. It's prom, and my after hours party is at the Palms. And I totally had that realization, like, oh shit, if you raise kids here, like, they party way different. Like, they're
way
not
different.
Just like sneaking down to Riverside to cruise, or like sneaking out and running through a field. Like, I think I would rather my kids like trying to get alcohol poisoning in a field than running through the Palms.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, you can definitely probably elevate to like adult shit real quick in Vegas.
Oh yeah, because all your friends are valet, so like, you know, you're 18 years old and you have a valet job and you make like
that's
$2,000
so crazy. It's probably so much more cocaine there. Just
immense amounts.
Yeah, it's like we're all about the weed here, because I remember in Las Vegas, wasn't it? They were fucking like throwing people in prison for weed, like not too long ago.
Yeah, when I almost came home. So when I got down there, I couldn't find weed, and you know, I didn't know that I was from like the sacred cornucopia of weed.
Yeah. Because you're there. You just don't.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so like my first, like, my husband at the time, I was lucky, was in the waiting industry. So, you know, there was a dish boy there somewhere to get weed from. But even then, when I saw the weed, I was like, what the fuck is this? I'm going home.
No choices.
There's no choices. No. It was really hard to find like a stable connect. And then, you know, working for Boys and Girls Clubs, you're not really supposed to smoke weed. So I actually did get random drug tests there. So I had it all planned out. I always made sure that I never went to our administration building before the head shops open, so in case I needed to get synthetic urine.
Wow. So, no, it's really
I had it down pat.
It's kind of a weird, the whole like drug test thing, and I mean there's a huge hypocrisy around cannabis and like legalization and miseducation. It just seems so crazy to me. Like, I just saw that Joe Biden said, you know, like he wouldn't legalize it because there's not enough evidence.
I hate Joe Biden.
It's the worst. Like, it's like, oh my God. But it, you know, I mean, it's crazy to me because there's not enough research. But
it's the double blind.
But you can smoke cigarettes. Plenty of research. It kills you, but totally
please.
Fine.
Alcohol's the same way. There's tons of pharmaceuticals that have shown awful side effects. Yeah, I always felt like that was because I was closeted. I couldn't tell people, which definitely prevented me from having friends. Like, I definitely hated hanging out with work people because...
Yeah, you had to be somebody different. You couldn't be yourself. You couldn't just be like, hey, I just love weed and this is who I am. And this is like, had to...
Yeah, and I don't want to go have a drink after work. I want to roast a bull afterwards.
Yeah, it's just a different. And it doesn't mean we can't be friends. It just means that God, I can't relax while you're relaxing.
I don't relax.
I kind of have to suffer because y'all out drinking, and I just want to smoke so bad, so I gotta sneak off and hit my dirt weed that I just got from fucking Joey the busboy.
That was my life. It sucked.
God,
I hated not having. And then we moved to Oregon for a short time, and we were in like. When I was recruited for the Boys and Girls Clubs I worked for in Oregon, I heard small town, and I thought, oh, like Spokane small town. But no, it was Lebanon and Sweet Home, Oregon, which was like...
Oh, I'm familiar.
Oh, it was so small.
I was actually just there.
You were?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, my cousin got married, and that's where they're from, is Sweet Home. Oh. So I was just there.
Are they cousins?
No, I don't think so. I hope not.
Well, I did. I asked the social... Because everyone in Sweet Home's related. And so I finally asked one of the social service ladies I worked with in Lebanon. I was like, so, like... do cousins, marry there? She's like, oh, yeah.
Wow. Who would have thought in the Northwest? I thought that was a Southern thing.
Well, if you spent any time in Lebanon and Sweet Home, it can feel Southern.
Mm-hmm. It's just really small.
It's very sweetest people I ever met in all of my life, but very small and different.
I mean, it's like the judginess that you feel when you're like in a small town, and like people are like, oh, what's that? Who's that? Oh, they got it, and people are just talking, and they're just paying attention to what you do. There's not a lot going on.
Oh, nothing going. I mean, it was weird. I only lasted a year.
But then the big city's like the same. I hate the big city too for just like the disconnection, and people walk right past people and they just don't treat them like people.
I think Spokane's kind of the best size.
It's totally.
I hope people don't find out about Spokane, because I do think it's like a secret gem. Like, no traffic, amazing outdoor stuff.
Beautiful river, just like the mountains right there. Yeah, we have everything. Except for like a club. We don't really have a club. I think that's we could probably use a club here.
We could use a decent club.
Like just a club where people could like dance, because people are just pressing up against each other at Lucky's and like or Barachos. Like that's like pretty much what we're getting. It would be nice to just have like a Seattle-esque club.
That had space. Like I hate when I see a line in Spokane, it's very disheartening.
Yeah.
And especially at 9,
Oh, that's the place to dance.
And
that's what we have right now.
It is. And being in Spokane and standing in line in front of a gay bar is probably some serious progress for Spokane, but it's still a little frustrating.
We could still
all
use
these
more.
breeders here.
We got we're starting to get some more cool stuff. Like I was just talking to somebody. I'd really like a Dave and Buster's, because I'd love to just be able to go somewhere where you can just kind of like do adult video games
with other adults and drink.
Yes.
Chuck E. Cheese does that, but it gets weird.
Well, I mean, and it's like when there's a ton of kids everywhere.
There's too many kids.
Then you're just like, oh, I'm like getting, you're drinking around kids that aren't yours, and I might knee a kid or something on accident. It's just not safe.
I have several nieces and nephews, and when I worked for the Boys and Girls Club here, going to Chuck E. Cheese was like the worst thing ever, especially on a Saturday, because I would know, especially working at the clubs, because Spokane's the size of town, I would know like all the children there. Yeah. So I couldn't drink beer or look too high.
Yeah. So it's always like you're just on your toes.
Yeah.
You just kept on your toes.
Kids are everywhere you go. Like in Vegas, I remember I'd walk around there all the time and never hear or see anybody here. Especially working for the clubs here. I mean, I could be at Walgreens and be like, hey, my son didn't get to sign up. I'm like, I don't even work in that department. Like,
that's crazy. It's just small enough.
You can't get away.
Yeah. It's just small enough to where, that's Spokane too. It's like big enough to where you can kind of get away and not, it's not like everybody knows everybody. But if you go downtown, you're probably going to run into some people for sure.
Yeah. And people I think it's like, 2 degrees of separation. Like in Spokane, you can get to people pretty quickly.
Yeah. Everything is like 15 minutes away, no matter where you go.
So nice.
Yeah. It is nice.
I love locals too when they get pissed if it takes longer than 15 minutes to get somewhere.
Oh,
when they
yeah.
act like the valley is like 3 states over.
Yeah. It was like, I was talking about going somewhere like up north, to like Wandamere, and my buddy was like, oh dude, that's way too far. I was like, it's like 12 minutes. Like, what do you mean? Or 13 minutes or something like that.
Spokanites hate that.
It is, but then you got to get some perspective. Like I went and lived in Jersey for a little while.
Ooh, fun!
And you're just like, oh my god, like it was
They're intense.
It was fun, but yeah, exactly. It was a lot of people jammed together, so a lot more of that kind of high stress driving and the lines and uptight people. But it was what I really liked about it was that you could get places really quick. So it's like, oh, if I wanted to go to Philadelphia, it's like, oh, that's 45 minutes. Oh, you want to go to New York? Okay, that's like, an hour. Oh, you want, over here, it's like anywhere you want to go is like, if you want to go to Boise, that's like 7 hours. You want to go to Seattle, that's like 5 hours.
It's the opposite of metropolitan.
Yep. But that's kind of the diamond in the rough of this whole place, and everybody is figuring out about it. I think all the people from California are kind of like, what's this Spokane place?
I can buy a house. I can buy a house there.
Yeah. And I mean, to have beautiful scenery all 4 seasons and be able to get a house for the price that you can get here, I totally get it.
Yeah. My sister, she's an attorney, and she bought a house here and still worked in Southern California.
Wow. Just because it's just
more cost effective for her to work here or to live here and work there.
Really?
Yeah.
So just has to like fly around a lot?
Just flying every couple months, go to if she has trial or whatever. But for the most part, yeah. When she did that, it definitely was more cost effective. And she could buy a home. She's like,
wow.
I'd never be able to. And she's an attorney. And she still couldn't afford to buy a house in Southern California.
Yeah, and I heard Southern California is just wild. It's crazy how like the most beautiful places on earth are just so crazy because so many people are there. Like LA, like Florida, like any of these places where you would be like, oh, that's gorgeous. Like I'm gonna live there. It's like, oh fuck. Like,
and I disagree. I think Southern California is ugly.
So
it always has that like weird haze. Like you never see a clear sky.
Because it's just like I've never been there before.
Oh, you haven't?
No, never.
It's the worst. Like people are awful.
I've heard.
They're just awful.
I
like
heard,
gross, awful. And
like just not nice.
Aggressive. Like I've been called aggressive, but it's a different kind of aggression. Like it's ignorant aggression.
You're kind of maybe I feel like there's obviously probably something in there where you're like built by the place you live in.
Right.
Like so when you're in this place, it's kind of dog eat dog. Like everybody's this way.
Oh yeah, my sister was totally like she is. It took her like 2 years to unwind after she left there.
Really?
Yeah, and she was there. She went to law school there and then lived there for I think 11 years.
Wow.
And it took her at least 2 years back before I was like, you can
just chill. Up here, it's so unbelievably chill here.
It is.
Like people are not really tripping. And when I see somebody that's like tripping or like I'm like high strung, I'm like, dude, whoa, are you? I'm like something's really going on in this person's day because
this is a lot.
Because we're not really. Yeah, it takes. There's hardly traffic is not traffic here. So
the cost of living is fairly reasonable. Fairly high minimum wage.
There's jobs.
Yeah, and there's jobs here.
Mm-hmm.
An array of jobs too. It has a pretty good job market.
Not a good place to be homeless though.
No.
It's fucking cold.
It is hella cold. But I don't know. So when I was with Empire Health Foundation, that's the philanthropic organization I was with before I went into cannabis. Mm-hmm. My purview was homelessness. And so it was my job. I think I had about $250,000 that I granted out. And then I had about $250,000 that I could leverage to bring in federal dollars. So I would work with charities like Catholic Charities and Volunteers of America to bring them together to go after large federal dollars.
Oh, okay.
And then my purview specifically was homelessness. And so what I found out about homelessness, especially in Spokane, is that a majority, I think over 2/3 of the population in Spokane who are homeless were either in foster care or they are veterans, which obviously tells you it's a systemic issue.
Yep.
It's not just people who are lazy or can't find work. Most of them are really, really sick.
Which is like exactly what some people just peg the problem as. They want to simplify it into just, they're just fucking lazy people that don't want jobs.
They don't want to work. Most of them can't. I mean, the stories that I ran across, a lot of the people, they're not capable of being functional members of society. Mm-hmm. If you've ever, I don't want to disclose, there's this one homeless person who's around Spokane a lot, and he lost his whole family in a car accident. Wow. And he was a lonely survivor, and he lost his 2 daughters and his wife, and he just never recovered.
Yeah.
So that was like.
So he wasn't homeless. He had a family.
He had a family. He had everything. But
and then just fucking lost the will to.
Yeah.
I mean, I can try to imagine that and like what that would be like, and just having your family and then you're alone and trying to. I mean, I think a lot of people don't take into account mental health. They see physical health, the heart, the gut, just physical thing. But what's going on in the head. A lot of folks don't really take that into account of what kind of mental issues and like how much of a struggle that it can be to try to balance you.
Well, and you can see there's a correlation between, not that the sanitariums or the loony bins, as they like to call them back then, were good because they were very abusive. But at the same time, you can correlate the shutting down of these facilities and an increase of people living on the streets because they have to go somewhere.
They do, yeah.
I do think that, us as citizens do have a responsibility for those who may not be capable of taking care of themselves.
Well, and I think that we need to rehabilitate people, and we need more programs like that. I mean, even people that go to jail or people that go to prison or people, I mean, some of those people are just like homeless people that were just like, it's fucking cold out here. And, and then now they're in jail or they're, and it's just like a vicious cycle. And I mean, I just feel like there should be some rehabilitation rather than just like caging people up and just like being like, all right, this is punishment. You're in trouble. Let's learn something here and try to help people. A lot of times people will, they won't be able to get to where they want to be mentally because they just need some help.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they just need some help. And it's just like life is all about who you're around, who you're surrounding yourself with. And if you're surrounding yourself with people that are just doing, shitty stuff and being, shitty people, and those people all get around each other, then you're just going to be caught in this like vicious cycle. But if you get around people that genuinely care and want to help you and like are positive and like push you in the right direction, it's amazing to see how much progress somebody can make from being homeless or just having no will to want to do better to just being motivated and having friends and having a normal life. And I feel like a lot of those people just want a normal life.
Well, and I think we have to be okay with people are only going to progress so far. Some people are never going to be able to maintain themselves again. That's okay. Like, I don't know. I think we put so much emphasis on this ideal that we have to be, I'm constantly working or generating revenue in some way, which I love to work. And obviously I create jobs where all I do is think about working environments. I get a lot out of working, but does not a community get a lot from the person who might maintain a community garden? Does a community not get a lot from the woman who might just stay home and visit with the elderly people on the block? Like, I think what we see in terms of value, I've said a lot in terms of capitalist, our current form of capitalism is boring. Like if our only bottom line is the bottom line, like what are we really doing? It's kind of counterintuitive to what makes a healthy, happy person.
It's all measured in your ability to generate money.
Right.
And like, that's where your value is based. There's not any value for somebody who stays at home and takes care of the kids and stuff like that. Like in society's eyes, it's, like if there was a stay-at-home dad, you're just like, that dude's a fucking loser. That guy's like at home, like, dude, get a job. Like that's what people say.
I had a stay-at-home husband, and I loved it.
and there's a lot of value there.
No, honestly, I would tell you that I think men make better stay-at-home parents. I think women, if that's what you choose to do, but I think sometimes women get really caught up because you're so connected to your child, like almost get too
you need to be
involved.
Out, like get out, yeah.
They become too enmeshed. But I think when you're
that's a
dad, I don't know. I was lucky enough, and I know the benefit of being a woman who's pursuing a career and having a stay-at-home dad. Like, if there were conferences to go to or traveling opportunities, like I could take advantage of them because I had someone at home caring for my children. And so many men get that opportunity. They get to go pursue their career because there's someone home. And I can tell you that being a married person in a professional world definitely opens more doors for you than being a single person. And being a person that has someone at home to maintain those children, allow that person who's out working to take advantage of opportunities. You know, I can go grab drinks with my boss. I can go golfing for 8 hours on a Saturday. Those things open doors and make connections. And if you're not able to do that because you're juggling childcare, then
especially,
you're not going to get those opportunities.
Especially in those like dual income households where you have, you know, it's like when I grew up, it was just both parents worked. So it was like I just come home and like nobody's there, and it's just like,
or you go to the Boys and Girls Club.
Exactly. And you know, I did find that like when you got to keep your kids like, you got to keep them busy. You got to keep them like doing things. And I saw dads who were like the family that lived across the street. They were all homeschooled and like really involved in the church. And their dad was like always spending time with them and jumping on the trampoline with them, shooting hoops and playing video games, like doing all this stuff. And I saw the importance of like having that structure and having like having both parents obviously is a big deal too, you know, divorce and all those things play into how a child develops. It's crazy.
I mean, obviously me and my ex-husband, we're divorced now, but he's we joke about it, but he's a much better father than I am a mother. I am very focused on my career, and I have been most of our son's life, and it has taken precedence sometimes over parenting, but I was able to do that because he has a dad who's very diligent, and they have a relationship that I don't see with a lot of dads and sons. I mean, they have inside jokes about me. They have like their own thing, and with us being divorced, like I see a human who's comfortable in his dad's space as comfortable as his mom's space,
which is so important.
And you know, we still show up together. We still will sit by each other at events. We definitely put him first, but
so you guys get along.
We get along. But I will always say, like, stay at more. We should have communities where staying at home doesn't bankrupt a family, and that one parent, if that's what they want to do, the community should support that.
Well, I think that there's like a lot of value in homeschooling too. If you can do it, like being able to control that curriculum and being able to kind of, I definitely think, because from a social aspect, kids going to school is a big deal, but I can see from a parent's perspective of wanting to teach your kids the things that they're really going to use in the future. And what's crazy is it's like, they say that kids that are in school now are they're gonna have jobs that don't even exist right now.
Right.
So it's like, how do you even? There's a lot of, how do you even prepare for that? So I mean, I think back at school and how many classes I took that were just a fucking waste of time. I'm like, why did I don't need any of that information. I didn't retain a lot of that information. You know what? You guys were really just training me to be somewhere for 8 hours a day, to do what I'm told, to take a 30-minute break, to, you know what I mean? And
this is where I push back on homeschooling, because I think if more of those homeschool parents engaged in their I'm a huge advocate for public education. Okay. I think it should be totally changed. I think that the current system is flawed. I think it's racist and sexist and volatile, and I don't think it supports kids. At the same time, I believe that parents need to engage in their public school system, because then too many kids like me whose parents weren't involved would fall through the cracks. And like, I always think it like, it's really important that my son sit next to that kid who needs him sitting next to him. Yeah. And also it gives your kids an opportunity to really live out the values that you're instilling in them. Like, that's great that I can keep my son home and just, let him know that we live in a racist, sexist, colonialist system and he has to fight it. But until I put him in those systems so he can observe them and see them in action and understand how he can engage in it, then how am I helping, or how do I make it beneficial for everybody? I mean, you're right. Because I do push back on homeschooling a lot. Like, I think it's great if you want to do that. And I think that you do a disservice to your community by not putting your kids in public schools and not being that parent that shows up to advocate for all those kids whose parents aren't advocating for them. That's true, because there's a lot of I know people that it was just like, go to school if you want. Like there was a lot of that, and I was like, I went to public school. Oh, my mom would pay me to stay home and hang out with her. Really? Yeah. But I grew up in a very like not traditional home, so.
I mean, and when I was a kid, that was the cool home. I was like, damn.
No, that's why I think that's why me and my sister went to college. Like we couldn't rebel. Like we couldn't be as bad. Our mom's name is Terry. We couldn't be as bad as Terry.
Because you were just allowed to do things.
We definitely had a lot of,
So you still wanted to rebel.
freedom to a point. Like she definitely kept us close. But we were allowed to know a lot of things. Like by the time I was in high school, I knew about credit card fraud. I knew how to open a call girl service. I knew how to. I knew about selling crack. I didn't know.
So I mean, like a lot of these things served you well because you were taught like, would you say like things that like real life things that you could learn early on, and you didn't have to be like naive to these things like in the future when you're, learning them when you're 27. It's
no,
like, yeah.
My mom kept like I always say that her saving grace was that she was super honest. Like, when I asked where babies came from, it was they come out of your crotch, Lacrecia.
See, because my parents were such bullshitters. Like they were they would just bullshit like everything. He can't know that. Oh, he can't hear that word. Like I remember I've said this on the podcast before, but I got like an edited CD, like an edited Limp Bizkit CD, and my mom was like, "No, you can't have that." I'm like, "It's edited." They're like, "Yeah, but you know what they're saying." I'm like, "I know what they're saying. That's what I'm saying." Like, she's like, "No, that's and seeing how some of those methods that were like older methods and just like sheltering your kids from everything, and how that was so ineffective in a lot of ways, and how I saw it be effective in some ways, and how I saw it be just like your kids or your parents can kind of be your enemy if they're not being honest with you, especially at a certain age.
I definitely like my mom had a lot of bad parenting techniques, but honesty was the one that I think served her well. And she was brutally. I knew lots of things long before I probably.
I feel like there's a lot more respect there too. Especially when you're older and you're just like, thank you for just being honest with me about things, and because it helps you become a better adult. Really. And
I think, as a young woman growing up in the environment that I could have grown up in, you mentioned too about like the outside influences. Like there are moments in my upbringing where I look back and I was like, damn, I got lucky.
Yeah,
like
dodged a bullet.
I dodged a couple. In fact, we have a cousin who passed away of cancer, and I flew, and her service was in Southern California. And I flew down to go to the funeral, and my sister picked me up from the airport, and I'm giving her directions to the service, and I'm like, and take a ride on Crenshaw. And I looked at Natasha, I was like, oh yeah, okay. And like we get to this little church on Crenshaw, and it was very much like this moment for me of like, this could have been your future. And her parents were a little different than my parents, and she ended up in a lot of the same environment that we grew up in, except for doing the same thing. So when she passed away, she was still stripping. She was 20 years old, and I looked around, and like everyone in that room was a pimp, a player, a hustler, or a prostitute.
Wow. And
I was like, ugh. And I had to leave the room because I was just like, damn, like my upbringing could have been vastly different if I hadn't taken a couple different turns. But that's definitely the way we grew up, especially at that time in the 90s. Like it was, my mom did not, like we listened to Second to None and E40. And
wow.
There was there was nothing was ever edited for our
well, it's
our age.
I think that it's like a lot of kids who were sheltered, they like kind of idolize these some of these situations that people grew up in, these harder situations, these pimps and players and shit like that. And it's crazy because people who are actually living in those situations know that those aren't healthy situations. And that I just think it's very interesting how in this country, like that kind of stuff is put on like a pedestal. And then same with like drama and like that's just like such a, I guess that's probably everywhere, but it's just like that is such an important thing. Like, I don't know, maybe it's like people are bored and that's what it is. And it's just any kind of drama or something that can be,
No, someone asked me, they're like, your mom's not on drugs or anything. And I'm like, no, she smokes weed. That's it. They're like, but her life is so crazy. And I'm like, yeah, she's addicted to the drama. She's addicted totally to the lifestyle. And if you like that lifestyle, it's fast and fun and also heartbreaking. Like I wouldn't I wouldn't want to live looking over my shoulder all the time.
No.
Like I wouldn't, it was hard enough to grow up in a house where we were thoughtful of like, oh shit, that car's been parked out of the outside for a while.
Like, what is that? Who is that?
Who is that? Before medical days when we were younger. When we got older though, my mom we had one of those split level homes. And so she turned the whole like basement that's usually a rec room into a grow room. And so
very smart.
And my mom's a little lady, so my uncle like rigged all of her watering systems and all of her plants were on rollers so that she could access it.
Oh wow.
So it was, and then she actually had there was a moment where I was like, I don't think this is a good idea, Terry, because she put up 2 greenhouses in her backyard in the middle of Hillyard, like right off Dalton,
where you could see.
And she's like, oh, I put a camper out there. We'll sleep in it. It'll be fine. I'm like,
okay. And so she didn't hide any of this stuff from you when you were a kid. Mm-mm. Like even when you were 10.
No.
Wow.
Never.
So that's so cool.
Nothing was, my family always, and they always said, they say don't tell anyone what happens in our home. Mm-hmm. And, some people think it's wrong, but we don't. And I'm like, okay.
I was going to ask about that conversation specifically, about how like she would tell you, like what she would tell you. Cause obviously you're going to public school.
Right.
So you're not just like, oh yeah, we grow weed at my house.
No. We just don't talk about what happens at home.
Yeah.
Like it was pretty grained.
She was really strict about that.
Psyche that we never talk. And I do have a friend who told on their parents and they got busted.
Wow.
So that it did happen.
Like, bro, like, what did you just do? Like, damn. Like,
but you get inundated with dare and
you're like, oh shit, my parents are drug dealers.
Right. And they say, but I had a different family. My dad's from Chicago, so, and he's definitely, my dad is a little different than my mom. They broke up when I was fairly young, but he was always like, the government doesn't always know what's best for us. So he definitely prefaced it in a way that it was like a social thing, and that the government's not always right,
and not like, these people that are going to say stuff aren't always right. Yeah.
And so that made sense to me. So I was like, oh no, I won't tell.
And then, so how did that kind of affect you in how you looked at marijuana? Like obviously you didn't look at it as this horrible thing, but you knew that it was like illegal.
That was, I think for me, it was all, I didn't know it was
or
bad.
Like I guess I'm thinking like when you get older, like when you were kind of growing into like your 18, 19, 20, 21.
Yeah, 16, 17 got weird too, because if other kids, their families aren't okay with it. So it's like, oh, okay, like you can't just smoke weed in your room.
And you can be like the bad family or like the bad, like, oh, she's a bad kid.
Well,
like,
I grew up in Hillyard, so everybody loved us because we sold weed.
So that's true. Okay, that's true. Because it was like kids like.
No,
that's awesome. You were like the good family.
We were the good family.
Shit, we're trying to chill.
My grandma cooked for everyone. My mom she always made food. And she sold weed, and she sold weed to my friends. And they sold weed back. So what's interesting is Hillyard, there's like amazing. 6 of us that I know personally, and all of our parents grew too. So then we would sell it to each other from our parents. Or I had one friend where she would have her other friend buy it from her dad so she could sell it because he wouldn't sell it to her directly.
Wow. See, it was like there was a lot of hiding where I come from. My mom hiding it, sneaking around, and like I never knew. My whole life I never knew my mom smoked weed, and I smoked weed and she disciplined me for it and yelled at me for it. And then I found out, you smoke weed too? Like actively? Like it was such a weird.
I think my grandma tried. Like my grandma really was like, but we were straight A students. So
there wasn't an issue.
Yeah. Like even though we smoked weed, we were really good kids.
So when did you start smoking weed?
I started smoking weed when I was 13. And I remember the first time it was at my friend Ebony's house, and her older brother was home from jail because he was in and out of juvenile most of our friendship. So he came home and there was weed, and he was like, okay, I'll smoke it with you, and you can only pass one time. And so we just got super baked
on your first try, time.
And we ate homemade hamburgers, and It
The
was
best.
great. And I fell in love with weed.
That's a
ever
great
since.
first experience. And, you know, a lot of people say they didn't get high like when they first
Oh no,
smoked.
I was fucking baked, and I was not scared. I was quite happy about it. I was like, this.
Yeah, what was going
This
through
is
your
the
head at that
best.
time? Because you knew about it. You knew that people in your family did it, and you were just, so it was just kind of like, oh
Yeah,
shit,
I
this
was
is
like-
my time. Like I'm
So
gonna.
I was like, let me try it. And you know, alcohol and other drugs weren't the same for me. Like I didn't like drinking. When I tried that, I was like, oh no, this is definitely not fun. I didn't like the out of control feeling. But I also think, you know, I did grow up in a very different environment, and so I was a little bit of an anxious human anyway, so it definitely mellowed me out a little bit, which is probably good for everybody. But
So you get that high sativa, then you're just fucking tripping. Oh,
yeah,
shit.
I could do homework, and then I could
fuck.
relax. Like, and then I told my mom too. I was like, "Yeah, I smoked weed with Ebony," and she was like, "I knew it was gonna happen eventually."
And not even tripping about it.
No, and I tried to find you a picture. There's actually a picture of me in 9th grade, and I have all of my little sister's friends like in this little circle around me, and I have a pop can.
Really?
And I'm getting all of them high for the first time.
Yeah. So if you can find that picture, we'll definitely fucking put that up, so everybody can see that. 'Cause
Yeah,
it sounds
I
amazing.
got my sister. I got everybody high I was always getting people high. Like I thought everybody should smoke weed. I definitely became my only drug of choice by then, and I think weed's great. Like it helped me get through college. It helped me focus. And my sister, who's an attorney, will tell you that she passed the California bar the first time high, and she was only
Wow.
24.
It's crazy that big misconception about weed and people not being able to function on it, and people getting, you know, oh, people are fucking lazy, they don't do shit, and it's so crazy the amount that people can achieve high.
Well, and I think that's because for so long you only saw one stereotype of a stoner, and there is like, you know, which I got way more exposure to when I was working at Bodhi High. Like, there's this like heady culture, and I think for me, I wasn't, you know, yeah, I'm a festival kid, and yeah, I did this stuff, but as far as really being entrenched in heady culture, that really, I didn't have to go there to get weed.
Yeah.
I was accessing weed from the old hippies, so I didn't. It was just a different experience for me smoking, and I think isolating too, because I didn't hang out with anyone who didn't smoke weed.
So it was just a normal thing. It was kind of already ingrained in the culture that you were growing up in. You didn't have to go to this other thing. So it's
Most of my friends could smoke weed in their bedrooms.
So when did you start working for Bodhi High? When did that happen?
Oh, so 2015, I left Empire Health Foundation, which Empire Health Foundation is the largest philanthropic organization in Eastern Washington. When the sale of Deaconess happened from a nonprofit hospital to a private hospital, this entity received the endowment. And so I was working there, and I was really I was kind of over just kind of sitting on the sidelines, like just being a learner. So I think when you're in those positions, my boss would always be like, oh, Lacrecia's railing against the privilege of philanthropy again. Because it was really hard for me, like, to sit in these spaces of like meals at the Spokane Club and just talking to people about poverty. And especially talking to people who don't really understand poverty. Also not understanding that not everybody wants to engage in your system. Like there's tons of people who want to be ghetto fabulous all their life and never engage in this weird system that we've created, and they do it just fine.
Yeah.
And they live a happy, healthy, successful life in their own space. And so just kind of really tired of that. And so in 2015, I took over my mom's I took over at the Eastern Washington Cannabis Market, took over her garden grow. Me and my little brother basically started running the shop. Bodhi High at that time we kind of ran into each other at the same time. So they set up they had their own little kiosk. They were kind of like little booths. So their booth was right across, and we were the first girls in the market. So I was one of the first ladies. There was one other lady there before I came. But we were running booths. And so they also brought in, Ashley, and she was another chick. So, you know, stoner chicks, we tend to bond pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it started. I really liked their stickers. Like they came in very branded. I, at that time, had put in, with my group, we put in for a retail license. And then I had met Sam from Conscious Cannabis, or from Bodhi High at the time. And they were just getting ready to get their rec license on the producer processor side. And so I asked Sam kind of, we started chatting, and he was telling me of some of his organizational challenges, specifically just process, procedure, getting the right people in the right places. And I said, I think I can help you. I was also doing consulting work at that time too, in addition to running the booth. So I started just doing consulting work for Bodhi High, doing their strategic planning, helping them really identify their mission statement, getting
And
their...
when did they start? They started in
2016.
2016.
So
okay.
in 2015, we kind of started. They got their license in 2016. I helped kind of through their formation process, through their license, and then I kind of went my own way. About 6 months in there having their license, I got a phone call from Sam, who's the founder and owner of Bodhi High. Conscious Cannabis is the producer processor license. And he's like, can you come back? We're just, really struggling with kind of the internal operations. And so I was like, yeah, I'll come do another consulting contract. And so I set up another consulting contract for him. And pretty soon I had a desk. And that was in like the spring. And by October, I took a position. And then I was offered ownership in the brand lines. And so I have a small percentage of ownership in Bodhi High, Honey Tree, and Bodhi Elements.
Yeah. So obviously Bodhi High does more than one thing.
Right. So, and I could give you the rent. So the way I see producer processors is they're just manufacturing entities. It doesn't matter what brand comes out of that manufacturing entity. Just like, Suave conditioner is probably made in the same manufacturing place that Paul Mitchell is made. It just has a different formulation, has different packaging. It's
Different
just
brand.
manufactured, distributed. And that's why I love Eastern Washington for cannabis. I do believe that as federal regulations change, that this will become more so than I think Southern California an epicenter for the production and processing of cannabis.
Why do you say that?
Because people don't realize that Eastern Washington, specifically Spokane, is an inland port. And Eastern, specifically here, we have land and we have water.
Okay,
and
yeah.
have it fairly reasonable. So when you're thinking about farming and manufacturing, we're specifically set up to
and
do
in
so.
friggin' Southern California, obvious reasons, it's a little bit different climate down there.
It is, and I do think we have there is a huge history of growing in Eastern Washington. I think that they've glamorized Humboldt County so much that they forgot that there's a strong history of growers in Eastern Washington.
And I'm not familiar at all with a lot of that culture as far as the producers, which is something that I want to get more familiar with, which is one reason I wanted to have you on too, because I know that you're very familiar with a lot of that kind of stuff. So like Bodhi High, they do, because I know Joey, and Joey used to work there.
I love Joey.
Yeah, he nothing but good things to say.
He's a good human.
Yeah, he's awesome, and he really sold me on Bodhi High. Actually, by the way, this is some Sub X. Thank you to our friends from Cinder for this delicious Sub X. It's the Whip is what we're smoking on right here. It's very tasty.
It is tasty.
I busted it out the jar and it was just fresh. I was like, woof.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was so good. Something about that seal just keeps it nice. And
Oh, I love the seals. You finally get I think that's, especially in the beginning of rec, is what you missed, is like just that little bit of sticky. Like for a while, everything was just so dry. And I, coming from the producer processor side, I get it. Like 1 ounce of mold and you're basically just, you have to send all of your
you would
crop
rather
then
it be
to
a little more
extraction.
dry than...
Yeah, it definitely could put you in a financial bind if you get a bunch of moldy weed. But I think they're finally kind of worked out how to kind of keep that freshness and still get that little bit of sticky from the bud.
I think definitely having like the having that seal on the top. This is a really good seal, and I think some people or some producers even go as far to, they do like a sticker, so they like stick the lid down and they have the seal, and then some of them just have the sticker, no seal.
Right.
And then anybody who puts it in like a plastic, so like a lot of times you'll see grams and stuff like that in like the plastic bag, and it seems that those will dry out faster. And I don't know.
The Mylar bags. Oh God.
It's just something about the jars definitely definitely keeps it fresher longer.
Agreed.
And like from a consumer standpoint, you in Washington, you don't get to smell it, you don't get to feel it, you don't get to, it's kind of just, you know, when you're paying 45 or in this case for like sub X, like $48 an eighth. You know, you want to know that you're going to get, you know, you can't take it back. You can't just be like, oh, this is too dry. I don't want the, can I get another one?
That's what was nice. Market, and I think I heard this recently, called it deli style. So in the market days, it was deli style. So I would have just jars, and I would have tongs or chopsticks that I would pull and weigh out right in front of the customer.
So that's how it is in like Oregon, I think.
Yeah, it's
right?
still like that in Oregon.
Yeah, they'll just bust open a jar, and they had like clones that they could sell you. I was like, what? Like, yeah, $20, pick up a clone. I'm like, wow. And I think that is, you know, obviously totally respect Washington's laws and all that stuff, but I really am passionate about people being able to just grow weed. It's a fucking plant that grows from the ground. It's silly to tell people that they can buy it, but they can't grow it, like grow it for their own consumption.
I agree. I mean, you're still going to get really great growers out there that you're going to seek out and want to get cannabis from.
Yes.
But yeah, you should be able to grow it in your own backyard.
You should be able to just have fun, and like it can just be like a fun thing where you just like want to grow some weed. You enjoy weed, so you want to grow it and see how good you can do it, try to get better at it. And
yeah, just like those backyard brewers, I'm sure they're still buying beer even if they're brewing their own.
Of course.
Like,
and
it
you
doesn't
just
stop that.
You know, it's not going to be too good. You know, if I grow weed the first, 10 times, I'm going to be like, oh shit.
And I mean, personally, I think I don't want to grow fucking weed. I don't want to trim it. I don't want to grow it. I don't want it in my
It's
house.
a whole thing, huh?
It is. So like in my family, my mom would be like, oh, I'm having dinner. Come over. Well, you would show up and there's pounds of weed and, shears, and basically you're cutting for your food. So, and I hate trimming. Like if I never trim again, it would be too
So
soon.
I've never trimmed before, but I heard that it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. It's hard work.
You just get, when people come into the store, they'll come in and they're just all sticky and just shit all over them and stuff like that.
Well,
I'm like, damn.
It's a very, it's a high complex terpene plant. Like you get that on your skin after a while. I know for me, even walking through the gardens, like I break out in rashes.
Really?
Yeah. And it's one of those things, like the more you're exposed to cannabis, the more likely you are to get an irritant or a rash from it.
I figured it'd be like the other way.
No, it's not.
Like the more you're exposed, you'd be like
less. No.
Yeah, you would be like immune to.
No, it's an itchy plant.
And it's kind of, I don't know, it's crazy that people, I feel like a lot of people don't want to understand it. Like especially in like some of these older generations, like my dad's generation, are people that are in that like 50 to 60, you know what I mean? People that are more like conservative, and it's just this like not wanting to be educated is such a fucking conundrum to me.
I think it's the school systems too. Like they don't teach us. You don't get taught to think until college, and that's why I think it's so baffling about. I don't think that traditional university systems are for everybody, but I think what you get at a university level is you're taught to figure it the fuck out. Like you're taught to look at a philosophy or a thought and learn how to dissect it. Really understand, where is this information coming from? Who paid for the information? Who did the research? What did the research entail? Is this qualifiable? Is it real? Is it
so to really
validated?
Use your brain to uncover these things, right? And that in high school was just like, here's some information, digest this information.
Remember it and write it down. Remember it and write it down.
And then college is more discover. Hey, you need to do your own work, which is the kind of stuff that really prepares you for life. And then there's probably an alarming amount of people that never make it there, right? So all they have is just the listen to what I say, remember stuff, and I don't know. It's just crazy because you have all these other things. So whenever I have a political conversation with anybody, I use weed as like the baseline, because it's like, and people are like, what do you care about? You just care about weed so much. And it's just the easiest thing for me to go off of. Like if you can't get on something that's just common sense, then we're not gonna be able to have a conversation, And so
that's a good test.
It's a good test because it's just, you have pills, you have cigarettes, you have alcohol, you have all these other things. So it's like, if you're not, the same things you're saying about weed, if you're not saying those same things about those things as well and criticizing those things as well, I think that a lot of people went along the assumption that if something's legal, it's good for you. Right. And if it's illegal, it's bad for you, which is fucking not the case.
Which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
Roundup. I love the conversation about Okay, so Roundup we know will kill you. It's awful. It's what causes a lot of problems for growers here in Eastern Washington because our soil's contaminated. It was illegal to manufacture it in the United States, but it was not illegal to sell it back to the United States. So then Roundup became produced in Mexico and then was just sold back to the U.S.
What the
Now, Roundup has some really great qualities because in terms of malaria, it did wipe out mosquitoes really well and got rid of malaria and saved tons of lives. But it also did not need to necessarily be used on all plant material.
Wow, that's kind of a fine line too, but it really fucks people up.
It does.
Is like that's the thing.
And that's I think why people don't like if it's legal it's good like that. Or if the Bible says it's okay, like I don't think they really dissect enough why and when and how this information came to be.
Cigarettes is the number one best example you can use because people are literally just smoking because they enjoy it. Mm-hmm. Whether it's good for you or bad for you, you're saying, I'm a free person and I get to make this choice to enjoy this. No matter how it smells, no matter how it affects me, I'm making this choice. But then when it's cannabis, it's like, it's so different, and so that's the thing. It's just so crazy, and then it's scheduled to, you know what I mean? It's this bit. It's just like on the same level as like
heroin.
It's above MDMA. You know what I mean? And which is it's just a plant that just grows from the ground. People have said it a million times. People have heard every argument. They've seen the comedians talk about it. It's everything, and still. Just fucking lazy potheads.
Which I've been busy my whole life. Like I don't think I've ever not been busy. So I don't. In fact, getting high and doing things is my favorite thing to do.
And yeah.
I've never liked just to get high and stay home.
I'm always like, and sometimes I'll be like, oh, I'm just gonna chill and smoke, and then I'll smoke, and then I'll just be motivated to do something.
Yeah.
So it literally does the opposite effect to me than just wanting to just be lazy and do nothing.
And I do have a busy mind. Like I think that under certain circumstances, people might have put me on different medication. But I think, to go to college and be focused and work full time and do all of those things and do them well, I think we definitely helped. It did not hinder me.
I think it literally it just makes things better. It just makes what you're already doing better. So if you're studying,
it's better.
You can make it better. Sure, you can get distracted if you fucking didn't want to do your schoolwork in the first place and you're smoking weed and now you're just doing something else that you would rather be doing. And really what it is it's hard for you to learn things that you're not genuinely interested in.
Yeah, my grades will always reflect that. I've always, even in college, I was like, if there's a class that I really thought was bullshit. I think I took the psychology of happiness at one point and I was like, I hate this class. So, and he kept using us as research, which I felt like I was forced into a research situation, and that made me.
So what was it like? Like what?
So every quarter we would have to, or every month or 2 weeks or something, he would make us fill out this 52-page questionnaire about our level of happiness and experience in our lives, so that he could use it for his research. And if we didn't do it, we got strapped with this 52-page paper we had to write.
Wow.
So it was either participate in his study or write the fucking paper. And I was
52-page papers. That's college shit right there.
I might be exaggerating a little bit, but it was something ridiculous. Like, I'm not going to write an extra paper.
No, you're like, I'll just do this.
I'll just let you
research me.
Research. I didn't want to participate at that time.
God. So, I mean, college is really, I think, an important thing for a lot of people. I didn't go to college at all. I learned a trade that I don't use. So it's like, but I just think that it is good for kids to go. I think that, obviously getting straddled with crazy amounts of debt for the rest of your life, and that kind of stuff is alarming. Hopefully somebody will take care of that and help that.
That would be great. I really appreciate
But
that.
I think that college is so important that, when you're in that stage of your life, it's just, you need to be fed information, and you're kind of in a place where you're choosing what you're going to be and what path. And before you know it, you're going to be on a path and that's your path now. And, you know, when we were kids, you know, it was always like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it was such a weird question when you're a kid, because it's never going to be what you're going to really be, because you're not really finding yourself at that time. You're just like playing and then you get into these like crucial years, like 17, 18, you're starting to just I'm going to do what the fuck I want to do. No, what? Like, and you're just like getting passionate about things. And I just think it's like a crucial time for kids to really
get to know. Yeah, I had a professor say that college isn't what you learn, it's what you learn about yourself. And I was like, yeah, it teaches you how to like just juggle life. Like it gives you an opportunity to practice that in a safe space. But then, you know, there's other theorists that believe that you should go off and like not do anything for a while and just
I've
be
heard
a
that.
human.
Yeah, we should just like go through like a point in time where you just travel and you're just like
just not. And I do. I think young people should just fuck off for a while.
Well, I think there's a lot of things. There's like all these balances, because I even think that like in the military, there's like good things in just in like instilling some discipline and traveling around. And then in a lot of instances, you know, there's like all the other stuff that's super fucked up that, you know, people have to deal with for the rest of their lives and stuff. So it's like, I don't know, there's like these balances of like needing to like figure things out for yourself, but then like having that discipline instilled in you to where you know what not to do and how to be successful. You at least have like the fundamental.
Yeah, like I think like every 18-year-old should have like their power shut off. Like that should be like
oh fuck.
Like yeah, like every young person should just have that moment of like, oh shit.
That's how I learned.
I think that's how most people learn.
Like my parents were just like, listen, bro, I don't know what you want us to do. We're not helping you, you know? And I just had to figure it out. And you just kind of, you know, you just hope you don't burn too much time. You know, I'm always worried about time. I think that's one thing I stress myself out too much, because I'm always worried about time, and I'm always thinking I don't have enough time. And I like watch stuff that Gary Vee says.
I love Gary
and
Vee
he's
too.
just always like telling people they got plenty of time.
You
like,
do.
yeah.
I say, and maybe because I'm at that age too, like I feel like I think there is a time where you get to like feel like it's intense, but in the big scope of it, you have plenty of it.
It's just you just feel like there's like you're supposed to hit like landmark. Okay, by this age I'm supposed to be here, and if I'm not here yet, then oh man, you know, what am I doing? And see, that's another thing, is that I feel like a lot of us, I'll just say a lot of us, we kind of think that people are at the same place in their lives that we are in our lives, and everybody out here is in a completely different place, mentally, physically, different families, different, you know, obstacles and things going on that we don't understand. And that's where that human psychology piece comes in, and people being able to understand people and being able to put themselves in other people's shoes and say, oh, you know, well, this person, fuck, dude, like they're, you know, their parents died, or this happened or that happened. There's reasons for this stuff. This person didn't just wake up one day and just be like, I'm not, you know, I'm just going to fucking not do anything, or I'm just gonna, you know, especially when you see somebody that's being hostile or somebody that's very angry, I'm always thinking that's, you know, that's stemming from something else. This isn't personal.
No, I think everybody, well, and I almost go to this to a fault of like, if someone's being weird, I just assume it's them, not me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really hard in professional situations too, because people immediately are like, oh my God, they didn't look at me or talk to me, they must be mad at me. Because I don't make any assumptions about anybody I work with. So I've done this, it took me a while to get here, but I take the assumption that if somebody's acting funny, that's them, it's not me.
Yeah. Yeah, because
which sometimes it is me. It has been me.
I mean, sometimes it is to see yourself like that.
I'm not going to waste my time obsessing over it. And also about time, like you have to have the experience. Like I think if you don't live through the experience, you can't have the foresight for the experience. Okay. So I think a lot of times, like, you want to be somewhere way out here, like you want to reach these goals, but until you have those experiences, to reach that goal, you have nothing to offer.
Wow.
So you have to have the experience.
That's wow.
I mean, I look back on like my early life, like, you know, why did I have to be born into that family with those experiences? But I had to, like, it made me who I am. And if I hadn't, and now for me, because, you know, I get paid to think, so my job is a little bit different. You know, a lot of times I'm not doing something, I'm bringing people together to figure something out and then coming up with a response. And so I'm high now.
Yes. Beautiful.
So
the weed is working.
So when you're paid to think and have experiences, I can't give people foresight on that experience unless I've had it.
Okay.
And so like growing up in a really turbulent experience and understanding what poverty is and growing up in Hillyard gives me this piece of experience and understanding humanity that I wouldn't have unless I had that experience, which now I get paid very much to figure people out, decide what position might be good for them and coach them into better positions. And unless I've had all these experiences, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Wow. I mean,
and for most people, there is a level
sense.
of experience that they have to prepare them for that, because until you're in it, like, you don't get to practice the skills to master something. Because I'm a bit of a hippie too. Like, I believe the universe will continue to bring you the same experience until you learn how to handle it differently. And so all
that's
of
true.
those,
I think that's
so
very
you're
true.
always given a chance to practice. And when I'm at work, I talk a lot about, like, my favorite book is Fierce Conversations, and it really teaches you how to have really hard conversations with people and do it in the moment when it could be super uncomfortable. Shiloh. Sorry.
So that's a book, Fierce Conversations.
Yeah, so that's being able to, like, have those conversations. It's really easy to talk about having a hard conversation, but when it presents itself and you're in the moment and you're feeling the feelings, it's really hard to have a thoughtful, respectful, and guided conversation.
And people are,
so until you get practice and build your muscle, you're going to continue to fuck up.
And like you said, it's going to keep bringing you opportunities. Right. Is if you're struggling with that thing, it's going to keep coming back. Which is crazy how that works, but that seems to be the case.
Yes.
And I find myself in situations where a lot of times you have to tell people just like what they don't want to hear, or you have to just, and you have to have hard conversations with people. And a lot of people have different egos and different things, and people don't want you to tell them what to do or what to. There's a lot trying to find the right ways. So it sounds like this book is.
Oh, yeah.
I'm already interested. I'm really very interested.
I read a lot of books and I apply them a lot to the roles that I've had. Many of the roles I've had are in some type of management position or overseeing people and processes and systems. And you have to, if you're going to do that, you have to learn how to have really hard conversations. And so it's a book, but it's a theory that's used in all conversation theory. It's just state the problem, state why it's important to you, and ask for clarity and then come to a conclusion.
So it's like
a little
just
more complicated than that, but it's not. Like,
it's just, you're just trying to find the most respectful way, because communication, I feel like people then don't communicate because people are afraid of the hard conversation.
Well, and they're making up a story in their head. Brene Brown, she's another like famous CEO lady who I like to listen to. And one of the things she said that really stuck with me is, like, instead of like just, our brain is built to make connections and make a story. Like, it wants to figure it out and have a reason for something. Mm-hmm. And so, like we mentioned earlier, like, there's somebody being weird in the meeting. You're like, oh my God, it's me. And so Brene Brown says, I do this thing where I'm like, hey, I'm making up this story in my head. And the story in my head is that you're really upset with me. And it's like, it's okay just to say, like, hey, are you upset with me? But I think it's more important that if you're upset with someone, that you bring it to them.
Yeah.
Because you can't just make assumptions. And
you're not going to be able to.
Something else you should never do. You should just get clarity.
And then,
like, hey,
yes,
are you
the clarity.
upset with me?
Because a lot of people will somebody will feel some type of way, not express it. Somebody else will assume something, and now you have just a whole clusterfuck of things that aren't even real. that are now all in people's minds, and now people are, and then when people, this is how the drama starts, when people go and instead of communicating with that person, now they go and they communicate it with other people.
Yeah, and they get all their friends involved. I mean,
and
it's
then
fun,
everybody knows,
it's
and
not effective.
And well, yeah, you don't know. Oh, have I done something wrong? You know, a lot of times, you know, maybe we're just not self-aware. Maybe we just don't. You know, sometimes we're all human, and we're just, you know, unaware that we're, you know, if I'm affecting somebody negatively, or if I said something, or if you think, you know, if my actions have, you know, led you to believe something. And it's just, I feel like we definitely need to push like more of a culture where we just, hey, what's up? Like, what's going on? And we just communicate it.
And we know ourselves better. Like, I think that gets to, I think if you know yourself well enough, you stop making assumptions about what's going on with other people. Like, I do like that, like, what you think about me is really none of my business. Unless you make it my business. And
you tell me. Yeah,
right.
Exactly. So what did you, when you were a little kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, what did I want to be? I think I knew I wanted to be a boss. So that was
You're usually... like, wow. You're like...
I always knew I wanted to be a boss. I don't think I might have wanted to be a lawyer at one point.
A lawyer.
Yeah, my sister's a lawyer. They're crazy.
So like sounded fun on like the outside. You're like, I'll be a lawyer. Yeah, and they're like, oh shit.
Maybe I think politics was always somewhere in there too. So that was another area. So that's what I just wanted to be.
Damn, those are some serious ass jobs for a kid to want to have.
I was a very serious kid.
Like I was like, I want to be a firefighter.
I did not get fun until I did acid.
And then it changed.
It did take acid to make me a fun person.
Really?
And I think that's why I think weed was so important to me, because I was like, I think when you grow up in an environment where you can't control things, you create opportunities to control things. So, you know, me being really good in school, like it was my own way of like coping with having a tumultuous childhood. It was like there I could bring order, there I could, you know, create this really safe place where I got to kind of understand and can interpret everything that's happening around me. So
that's so cool.
So as a little person, I was very like, I like to be in charge, and I like things a certain way, and so I would definitely create opportunities. I think we self-select for our careers too.
Like I'm gonna be a boss. It's gonna happen. Fuck this. I'm gonna just suck it up right now, and I'm gonna be running shit.
Which I do. I like being the boss. It's not something, but there's a lot of responsibility, I think, to be a good boss. And it took me a long time to learn how to be a good boss. And it is something you learn. You don't just one day get to be like, oh, these people just have to listen to me, because it's not, I don't want people just to listen to me. I want them to and I've gotten the luxury to work in areas I'm passionate about. You know, you can be passionate about kids and creating environments for them to be successful, or you can be passionate about pot because it's an amazing, and it's a social justice issue too. You know, there's many people who went to jail for pot who should not be in jail. No. And so, from a young age, I just really, I liked having a say and understanding of what's going on around me. And obviously it served me well.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, you're obviously doing great. So that works. And the kids that you work with, you know, and that you come across and that you teach and stuff like that, is just, they're in good hands. So.
And I think that's what managers should be doing. Like, it's an opportunity to teach. Like, the people you manage, the people that you surround yourself with at work, it's just, you know, you spend so much of your time there. Why not make that another place where you learn and grow? And that's what I got. And I think that's, you know, I haven't seen that as much in other places, but coming from philanthropy and nonprofit work, you know, I had professional coaches and I had learning opportunities to make me a better professional. And it made me love my job more and gave me more resources to be successful at what I was doing. And I just feel like all working environments, regardless of what level it's at, should create that, because I think we as humans want to learn and understand and have a deeper connection with what we do. And people should leave their jobs in a better place than what they came in.
And when people want to learn, it's just all about, back to that same conversation of just people they all learn their own ways.
Right.
And if it's something that you're not interested in, you're probably going to have a tough time learning it, you know?
Which, I mean, in this industry especially, I'm with a lot of non-traditional learners. Like most of the people that are on my team are non-traditional learners. And so for me, it's been really fun to try to figure out ways to utilize corporate tools and strategies with different learners. Like, people are very, there's audible learners who need to hear things and need to have the conversation, and especially people who aren't traditional and book smart, who can read and remember, they have to have those opportunities. And so creating learning opportunities that meet all of those objectives, especially adult learning, I think it's fun, and that I think companies would make so much more money if they put 1% into creating processes and training modules that engaged their staff at any company. Wow, and ones that do it in a consistent way. At Boys and Girls Club, we shut down once a month just to have staff trainings, just to give the staff, that's always possible, but I think that creating learning opportunities and expecting more from your staff gets you better results.
Yeah, I think so too.
It earns you more revenue. It creates more
and it's not a place, it makes more passionate people.
And then they're finding solutions for you. Like your staff will find solutions. They will start looking at their roles differently and want to find ways to be more efficient and more successful.
Man, just so much knowledge, so much wisdom. It's a beautiful thing, and it's so true, because people sometimes we just need a little bit of direction, and we need good leaders and good bosses and little girls that strive to be bosses and then become bosses. That's fucking badass.
I think, I always liked being called bossy. I never thought that it was a negative thing. So.
Some people, for some people, boss is like a bad word, but
and it was. There are I don't like telling people what to do. And when I was first given management roles, I really sucked at it. I hated it. I hated everything
because you wanted to. You didn't want to have to be somebody's.
I didn't want to be like.
You wanted to be like peer with them and just hey, let's work together.
Yeah, I wanted to be more of a communal experience, not just. And I wanted to get something out of it too. And I think when you approach management, so I always say, and especially in my business, you manage processes, you coach people. You don't manage people. People manage themselves. And the more tools you can give them to manage themselves successful, they'll meet the business goals and objectives that you set, and they'll do it better than you can do it by yourself.
I think that's a huge for school and stuff like that. That's what kids need more of, like to just kind of take more, just get a little bit direction, and then just be able to apply themselves and things that they're interested in, and move forward. Like that's, instead of trying to force square pegs into round holes, and then you got kids that are just like dipping out, like fuck this, this sucks.
And mine allowed me to, I manipulated the system in some ways. Like being good at school allowed me, to get out of class when I wanted, to get out of trouble if I did something wrong.
Well, you obviously saw that value though.
I did.
In being able to if I get my shit done, nobody can tell me shit.
Right. That's kind of the approach I take. If I get really good grades, if I get this done, then I can do what I want.
And that's how, when you talk about, do you miss being a kid? And you're like, well, not really.
No.
Because it's like, you can do the same thing as an adult. If you handle your shit and you take care of it, you can do what you want to do.
Although I do think more adults should have childhoods they miss.
Yeah, because I do have a childhood I miss too, but I think back to having to ask to do things and to always, having to run it by somebody else, and like how cool being an adult is, and being able to just like book a vacation and just leave and just to do anything you want all the time. It's pretty awesome. So we got to like reflect on how fucking cool it is to be like in this sweet spot of life we're in right now.
I do. I like being a grown up. I'm not afraid of it.
Especially in this phase, like we're right there. We're like in this nice little pocket of life that's pretty enjoyable, and the sun's coming out too. It's beautiful.
It's not as frosty.
Still frosty, but I'm seeing some blue skies out there through the window. But yeah, so man, thank you for coming on. Seriously, this is awesome.
Thanks for having me.
So this is usually where I would say like, hey, like plug your new album, but
I don't have but my wife is doing a pop-up. She is a vintage clothing curator. It's called Butch House.
Krista.
Yeah, my wife's kind of amazing.
Shout out to her for making this actually happen in the first place, because she messaged me and was like, hey, you should have my wife on, da 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 da. And then I just did my research, and here we are. So without her, this wouldn't be possible.
Yeah, Krista's the best human on the planet. I love her. But yeah, she has really great 90s fashion. You don't have to be Butch to check it out, but she'll be at Mood is a Feeling at the Steam Plant on Saturday.
Okay.
For Small Business Saturday. So there'll be a few other people there. So definitely come and see her. Or me, you can definitely, my website's Lacrecia.com. And if you are interested,
damn, how'd you get that one? Lacrecia.com.
It's my name.
Oh shit!
I know. I was really excited.
Wow.
It was still there.
Lacrecia.com. That's pretty fucking easy. You guys can remember that.
But if you do find yourself, needing support in your business in terms of facilitating meetings or strategic planning or developing educational tools for your staff and coaching models, I can help out with that too. But definitely come down on Saturday and see Krista with Butch House.
Awesome. All right. Lacrecia Hill, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys. Peace.
Yo, I'm just happy to be here.
I know lots of teachers. They party really hard. I looked around and everyone in that room was a pimp, a player, a hustler, or a prostitute.